Hi, I'm Adam, you can see me, and my husband John and I decided in December 2020 that we would like to become parents, and so we began our journey into the egg donor and surrogacy route. And yes, they call it a journey, and we are referred to as intended parents. Um, Today, this being the first video, I'm going to actually start with where we are right now in the journey. Uh, so, uh, as of April 29th, 2021, we had the egg retrieval process occur with our egg donor, Madison, and it was a success. 25 eggs were retrieved, which is a nice number, plenty to work with. On that same day, we also went to the fertility clinic in order to supply semen. We decided to provide it fresh, as it were, rather than having it frozen ahead of time, in order to, I don't know, it seemed like it was a great idea. And also, it would help avoid the fee for getting the semen samples frozen ahead of time. However, we did need to undergo additional testing on a little bit ahead of time. Basically, the FDA requires testing in terms of STDs, hepatitis, HIV, syphilis, all this sort of things through blood and urine analysis. And that has to be done relatively close to when the tissue sample is collected. We also were given an interview because, again, the semen we were providing is considered a tissue donation since it's, in theory, kind of, sort of ending up in another person. And so a lot of questions about recent tattoos and have you traveled international. A lot of the questions similar to what people are asked when they do blood donations. Of course, most of them seem standard and made sense. You know, did you travel to an area with Zika and virus endemic and such? Although a little annoyed that they still include the are you a man who has had sex with other men or a woman who has had sex with a man who has had sex with other men question. I think in 2021 they would have gotten past that already, but the FDA, the federal government, includes that still. So we, on the April 29th, were able to supply our semen samples. We had previously been tested. Semen analysis had occurred to show that we actually did have sperm, and I must say I was surprised to find out that normally in a healthy male, 95% of the sperm produced are morphologically abnormal. Only about 5% are structurally, morphologically, what we would expect and desire. Kind of weird. So that day we provided our semen samples. Funny story, as the technician woman handed me the sample cup and pointed me to the room, she was like, do you know what to do? And I could only think to myself, lady, I've known what to do since I was 12 years old. But I didn't actually say that to her. All right, after that, of course, is the fertilization. And nowadays, they don't just mix the eggs with the sperm, they actually select individual sperm to place into the egg, into the oocyte. So it's not as random which sperm will actually fertilize the egg, and it basically avoids the ones that are morphologically abnormal, even though we don't really know if the ones that are structurally strange or abnormal are have any sort of genetic issue, because that can be two completely separate things. And after the fertilization, we were sent a lovely report. Of course, we broke up the eggs into two groups, one for obviously my sperm and one for John's. And so we started off with 25 eggs from our lovely egg donor, and 18 of those were found to be mature. And those eggs were fertilized, and we got 18 fertilized eggs. Most of them are what I refer to as 2 PNs, although a couple were either 0 PNs or 1 PNs. What does that mean? Well, what does that mean? I had to look it up. Turns out that has to do with the fact that the fertilized egg should have in it these 2 spheres. Those 2 spheres are called pronuclei. Basically, one is the DNA from the egg cell itself, and the other is the DNA from the sperm. So eventually they'll combine to form one nucleus, but initially they're 2 separate structures, and that's what they expect to see. So we did not have any 3Ns. Those are always discarded, but they ended up sending the 0Ns and 1 PNs into the incubator, because why not? There's always a chance that when they examined the fertilized egg, the way it lined up in 3 dimensions might have made it difficult to see one of the pronuclei, and it's not like they take up that much space. So then they were incubated for 5 to 7 days. Basically, day 5, 6, and 7, they would take embryos out. So for me, 1 embryo was collected on day 5, 3 on day 6, none on day 7. So I ended up with 4 embryos that were biopsied and frozen. And for John, 2 were collected on day 5, 3 on day 6, 1 on day 7. And so he had 6 embryos biopsied and frozen. So started off with 25 eggs. 18 of them were mature eggs that were then fertilized. 15 of those were what we were hoping to see, 3 weeks. They continued with the incubation process just in case. And out of that, we ended up with 10 embryos. So you can see how you definitely need a significant amount of eggs to begin with in order to make sure you get enough embryos. Then they graded the embryos. So my embryos grades were 4AA through 4AB, and John's were 4A's, 4ABs, and 1 4CB. And then I, had to look up to find out what in the world these grades mean. So the number can be anywhere from 1 to 6, and it relates to the expansion of the embryo. Basically, at day 5, 6, 7, we are hoping to see a blastocyst, which is a large spherical structure with lots of cells forming the sphere, and then also a group of cells internally. And so we expect them to be a certain size. And what's the best numbers for use? Which the embryos are best in terms of numbers? Well, it wasn't really clear when I looked stuff up on the internet. My basic impression is 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s are pretty good. 4s are basically filling the protein shell that the blastocyst is initially within fully, very well developed. 5s are the blastocyst is starting to exit that protein shell, starting to hatch. And then 6, it has fully hatched. So ours are all 4s, so that's good. Those are good numbers. Then the 2 letters. The first letter refers to the cells that are clumped together that are expected to become the actual embryo. And they're graded A, B, or C. And A is the best, well formed, nicely in terms of size and location. And then the second letter has to do with the other cells forming the blastocyst. These other cells are the ones that will eventually help form the placenta. And they are also graded A, B, and C, with A being the best. So we did pretty good. Mine are all 4s. Peter's A's, and ABs, really good. John's, all 4s, most of them AAs and ABs. 1 CB, probably, if we can help it, we won't use that one. We'll start with the ones that got the better grades, went to embryo school and did well. However, that's not the end of the selection process for the embryos. There is one more step, which is that biopsy part. So for each of our embryos, they took a small cell sample, a few cells removed from the embryo, from the blastocyst, and that got sent to a company to do what's called PGT-A testing. And what this testing is doing is looking for chromosomal abnormalities. So are there too many chromosomes? Are there too few chromosomes? Are there perhaps some chromosomes that have some sort of a weird size difference from what's expected? And this is a step that often the surrogates really want, because the most common cause of miscarriage or implantation failure is abnormal numbers of chromosomes. And so this, in theory, should help prevent that from happening and lead to the best embryos being selected, so that we have the greatest chance of success when implantation occurs in the surrogate. And so that is where we are now, currently waiting on those test results to see how many of the 10 original embryos are appearing to be chromosomally normal. And that is that. Thanks for watching the video, and be sure to subscribe and like.